and services, and firefighters, police officers, EMS, public safety in general. We thought that and feel that it should be offered to them as well. So that's who the Bee Club is. We are all in services, if that makes any sense. Why the Bee Club? Well, that kind of goes into the same of who we are. We're made up of DLA civilians, DOD members, public service sector, and that's really who we are looking for the members to be. And we're, I guess, opening the door more for those types than just to restrict it to veterans. And the veteran thing is a bad thing, because Dr. Ingreo's program is very, very thorough. So when are the meetings? The meetings are going to be held the first Wednesday of every month. And we will try to keep it this way and see what the participation is within the club and go from there. Where will they be held? For now, they're going to be virtual. So it might be DCS and it might be another platform, but if this works out, we'll keep it this way. Okay?
Adam, can I interrupt really quickly? I know someone asked me for the slides. If I can't tell by the phone numbers who's on the call, so if anyone's on the phone and not seeing the PowerPoint and need me to email it to them, if they can just email me at lisa.grennan@dla.mil, I can send you the slides so you can follow along with the presentation today. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa. And if you can't see the slides, just email Lisa, and as we go through the slide deck, I will tell you what slide we are on. So right now, we're on slide 3, and this is the topics. Today, we're going to talk about the history of bees and beekeeping, equipment needs, purchasing of bees, and feeding of bees. Slide 4. As soon as my computer catches up with slide. Any day now. And my apologies up front. My computer is running very slow.
It moved forward for me, Adam.
Yep, me too.
Okay.
That's what we get. Technology.
Adam, do you want to go on with slide 4 since it jumped ahead, or do you want me to talk about it for a second?
Go ahead and talk about slide 4 until my computer catches up, please.
All right, everybody. So the evolution. So with this, we're going to talk about the history of bees. Bees obviously have been around forever. Their uses and how their honey is extracted is varied and changed by methods, and for good and bad. Bad being some of the ways are not as easy on the bees and or harming to their hives, so they almost have to restart when their honey is extracted. Beekeeping has been around for over 4,000 years. As shown on this slide right here, we have different ages and eras of beekeeping and how it's evolved and changed throughout the years. In this, on the right, there's a caption of the medieval skeps. Those were how the hives were kept, and they were almost destroyed when they were extracting the honey. In the middle, we had the long eastern hives, which are pretty much material based. They were not fabricated as far as wooden materials or anything like that, and they were just stacked on top of each other. So the honey removal of that process was not quite as intense as the skeps, but and then the caption on the left is the tomb of Phaebus. I think I said it right. I'm probably wrong. But it just shows you the era, 664 BCE. So that just tells you how long that people have known the importance of honey and bees and their work, because obviously we know back then if there was not a big value of the output, they would not invest time. So this shows you the importance that they knew that bees provided for people even back then. Adam, can you go to the next slide? Whenever if you're back, you
There
can
you go.
jump in, Adam.
Okay, good deal. So why Egypt? Well, Egypt had large amount of resources for,
You there?
yeah, Lisa, can you take over as presenter, please?
I did. I'm changing the slides now for you, and I emailed you the PowerPoint in case you needed it. You can't see it on here.
I'm not going to. Computer
Okay.
is being wasted. So why Egypt? The large amount of resources for forage, but the shortage of nesting sites that hampered the bees. Population growth and increases in the standard of living equaled the increase of demand in wax and honey, and that meant that when people immigrated or migrated to the Fertile Crescent back in those days, that was actually a monetary piece was honey, and it also meant wealth. So the agrarian culture that utilized the pots and baskets, when the bees swarmed, they went to those pots and baskets for possible nesting sites. Also, it's warm. So the forage is available all year, not like here in Michigan where we are actually wrapping up the bee season and preparing for winter and possibly a long, hard winter. So, as David spoke about earlier, they went from earthen hives to stone walls, and those stone walls were actually carved out of, mountain cliffs and things of that nature. And then we moved into skeps, and those are your traditional honeybee hives that we see today. And then we eventually evolved into what we know today. Next, please.
It changed.
Okay. Give me a second here. I'm going to minimize out of this screen, and I'm just going to go to my own PowerPoint that I have. So in the upper right corner, we have the skep beehives that I was just speaking about. And then in the upper right corner, you can see that there is what is known as a top bar hive. And the top bar hive is just as accessible as the below bottom picture, the Langstroth hive. And it's important to mention that we use skeps from medieval times all the way up until the early to mid 1800s, when this man beekeeper by the man of Langstroth made is for the most part one of the best selling and best known beehives. And this beehive is depending on how your setup is, it can be heavy. It can be really heavy, like 80 pounds heavy or 60 pounds heavy. If you're using mediums, like in the looks as though the top two boxes are mediums and the bottom two boxes are deeps. Those deeps, they're heavy, and if you have back issues or a back problem, you might want to think about going to medium frame boxes, which is what I plan to do in the near future. as my apiary grows. In the next slide here, we're going to talk about equipment needs. To be a successful beekeeper, tools are of utmost importance, and I can't stress this enough. Just some basic equipment and tools. Number one, it's not listed here, but you need to have bees. You need to have a hive at least. You need a smoker, a veil, a hive tool, and gloves. David and I have chatted about this at length, really, and equipment and tools when you're first starting out, and I'm sure there's people on this call that are experienced beekeepers, and you will know this. And then there's probably many of you out there that are just interested, so I'll just be really upfront about this. Getting into beekeeping can get really expensive really quick. I bought two deep boxes with 10 frames apiece, and I think 2 medium boxes with 2 medium frames apiece. The whole kit and caboodle, which we'll get here in a few minutes, and that was almost $400, and that was without my hive tool and gloves and veil. So it does get expensive quite quick. That was excluding the bees. So next, slide 8. And here is the pictures of what those look like. So again, we have our typical Langstroth hive. This apiary looks like it's pretty stacked of bees and all their goodies. The middle picture there at the top is what is known as the beekeeper's square veil. Those square veils also can be round. They can be attached to jackets. They can be separated, and you can just use a jacket. As a new beekeeper, I would highly suggest when summer comes around to definitely have a jacket. The picture on the far right at the top is a smoker, and we'll move down to the bottom here. The bottom left picture is of a J-hook hive tool. There are many different types of hive tools, and thankfully these are relatively, in the grand scheme of things, pretty inexpensive. You're looking at, $20, $25 onwards up to $40. And then you have, in the last picture there, is a set of gloves. And what you'll see is those gloves aren't your normal gloves that we'd use for, shoveling snow or getting in our car when working. These actually have an extension with an elastic cuff. And those will go all the way up pretty close to your bicep or past your elbow for the most part. And that's just some added protection. Obviously, your hands are going to be in a hive working, pulling frames. And these types of gloves make it a little difficult because you can squish bees unknowingly. I used this year nitrile gloves, and they seem to work really good. I doubled up on them, and the bees weren't able to sting through those nitrile gloves. And it gives you a lot more, I shouldn't say flexibility, but flexibility within working with the bees and just more dexterity. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the Langstroth hive body breakdown. This is just what your typical hive could look like. So we're going to start at the top and work our way down to the bottom. So if you were to purchase a beehive from any supplier, you're most likely going to get this set up minus a few parts, but you will get a outer cover, and the outer cover is covered with a really thin sheet of aluminum. You'll get an inner cover, and if you see, Lisa, if you can, take the cursor and go in the middle of that inner cover, you'll see that there's an opening there. And that's for the bees to, A, you can feed the bees from there, and B, That just gives the bees a way into the hive from the top, because usually there's a cutout someplace for the bees to have just another entry and exit point. Then you'll have a shallow honey super, and that shallow honey super, they can be deeps or mediums. It doesn't matter. It's just wherever the bees aren't laying eggs, known as brood. From there, you see a queen excluder. Now, some beekeepers don't like queen excluders. I used them on my hives this year, and I absolutely loved it. It kept the queen from going up into the honey supers and laying eggs, and when it came time to extract honey, I was just pulling honey frames and honey boxes and not having to sort through what's what. It just made it easier for me. And those will come in plastic and in metal. I bought plastic just because I had spent a lot of money on the one frame this year, or excuse me, on the one hive this year. I will upgrade to metal. You'll just get a longer lasting queen excluder out of that. And then you'll see two deep frames, or excuse me, boxes with frames. Now, obviously, the frames that go in to the medium super will fit in a deep, and deep frames won't fit into a medium super. But you don't want to do that. You want to keep your deep frames with deep supers, medium frames with medium supers. They'll end up building more comb beneath those medium frames if they're in the deep super, and it really becomes a mess. It really does. They'll just go rogue on you, and it's something that is something you don't want to deal with. So after that, those two deep boxes, you'll see a slatted rack. I don't have that on mine, and it's totally fine if you want to. Some people have it, some people don't. Below that, you'll see a bottom board. The bottom boards, let me go back to the slatted rack. Some folks do decide to put a screen on the bottom for better ventilation during the July, August time frame. I chose not to this year, and my bees did extremely well. So that's an option too. And then you will have a bottom board. So my hive sits on the bottom board of some cinder blocks, and then I have a couple deeps, queen excluder, just the way basically this is set up, minus the honey supers right now, because we're past the honey season. And then finally, you will have a hive stand. That's optional. There's a little slanted piece there, and that's a landing board for the bees. But I opted not to get the hive stand this year. I don't know if I'll get it next year. Again, it's just preference. Next slide, please. Okay. So now we are going to talk about purchasing honeybees and supplies. Now, I did not put this on here, but one way you can get honeybees is by collecting a swarm. And that is when the bees are going to be the most docile, is when they swarm. Several different tactics, several different ways to collect swarms. There's swarm traps that are available for purchase. You can make your own type. But the two ways that we're really going to talk about are buying bees, and the way you can get bees are from clubs and from beekeepers themselves. Now, some beekeepers are what they call sideliners, and they have up to 100 hives. And when they make their splits each spring, bees will need to be split because they're too big for their home. So you'll have to make splits. And the way you buy them is you can get a nuke or a package, and the way a nuke comes is just as in this picture describes. It comes, I think it's like a corrugated cardboard box with 5 frames. You'll get bees, wax, brood, pollen, and queen. That queen, the benefit of getting a nuke is the queen is already accepted by the colony. So the frames, when you get your nuke, those frames have to be orientated in the deep hive body the way they are in the nuke. So you'll take your center 5 frames out and you'll just start putting those frames in just the way that they are orientated here. And then you're ready to rock and roll. You just let them do their thing. You'll do your, check on them every other week, feed them, stuff like that. Next. Okay, the next is a package. And when you receive a package of bees, this picture here is what you'll see. You'll get a whole lot of bees with a queen, but that queen will need to be, well, she'll be in a cage. Excuse me. And she has not yet truly been accepted by the colony. And if she has not been accepted by the colony will kill her, and they will attempt to supersede her. With this package, you will have to, there's a metal container on top. You'll have to take that metal container of sugar and sugar water out and dump the bees, one as good as you can, foul swoop, into your deep hive body. And you can leave it open for a little while, and they will find the scent of the queen as long as she is in that deep, let me back up. When you dump the bees into your hive body, you will have to put the queen in her cage in between 2 frames. And you can come back 24 hours, 48 hours later, and if you can see the bees feeding her, the colony has accepted her. If the bees look like they are trying to sting the queen, you're going to have to get a new queen because they don't like her. If they've accepted her, you can open up there's a sugar plug in the queen cage, and they chew through it and they let her out. If she's not out already, you take a pair of pliers, you peel the screen back, gently dump her into the deep hive, and you can go on about your business. Either way, you are going to get 3 to 5 pounds of bees in the nuke and in the package. There's like 20 to 30,000 bees, so you're going to get plenty of bees to start off. I will tell you, the nuke that I bought this past spring, one of them went gangbusters on me, and before I knew it, I had 2 deeps and 2 mediums on, and that was by beginning of July. The other one, very lazy. So they weren't really busy this summer as bees can be. Next slide, please. So again, right here, I've just given you 4 off the top of my head that are very reliable and I guess trustworthy websites. Dayton and Sons, if you're here in Battle Creek, they are in Albion. Pretty good people to work with. Chris actually gives veterans discounts. Man Lake is another well-known website for bees and bee supplies. Kelly Bees, Better Bee. I think I bought my pollen patties and some medication for the bees from Better Bee this year. Again, bee clubs, reputable beekeepers. I need to also, as a side note, say that if you get on Facebook or if you get on social media and you get part of a beekeeper's page, not everybody out there is a good beekeeper. And I know for my goal in this bee club is to have educated beekeepers, not just people that have bees and purchase bees every year. Because if you purchase bees every year, then you're a bee haver. We want to be able to sustain those bees throughout the course of a year, so that way you're not always buying bees. Now, if you want to, be a pro and have 500 hives, that's on you. But if you buy bees, just try to do all the research you can on that farm because, bees are livestock. We're going to get that here in a second. But, a couple questions you can ask is, hey, do you treat for varroa mite? Or, how long have you had bees? What do you do? Type of stuff. One of the nukes I got this year, they were actually split in Florida because they were in Florida for their early fruit crop. And they didn't make it till later in the summer or later in the spring. The other one I got from Dayton, and they were ready to go. I think I got them first week of April. So it's just do your research is what I'm trying to tell you. Next slide. Okay, feed and feeding bees. Like I just said, the honeybee is actually classified as a livestock. So just as all other livestock we see on farms, cows, horses, pigs, goats, etc., honeybees need to be fed and watered. You need to have a water source, and they need to have some sort of food. So what do bees feed on? Well, bees feed on pollen, nectar, and we can supplement that with pollen patties and a sugar water mixture. When you first get bees in the early spring, you're going to be feeding them a 1-to-1 mixture of 1 part sugar, 1 part water. And here at this day and time, I'm feeding my bees 2-to-1 mixture, 2 part sugar, 1 part water. It's just thicker for them and helps them have more resources available through the winter. Okay, next slide, slide 14. Okay, so pollen is used to supplement the honeybees in the early spring and fall. There's, I know Tractor Supply and Family Farm and Home have pollen pellets. Again, there's so many suppliers that are available. Amazon has them. I would just say this. If you're going to feed pollen pellets, be sure to read the label, because just as everything else with bees, if you're trying to do this, organically, treatment-free beekeeping, there will be chemicals that they add into those pollen pellets. So just look at the label. The pollen patties, I bought mine from Better Bee this year, and the pollen patties are super simple. They're pre-made, kind of pre-packaged. You can freeze them. When I went to feed them this a couple weeks ago, I just pulled them out of my freezer. Took a couple hours to thaw. When I went up to do my beehive inspection, I just popped the lid, put the package directly onto the frames, closed everybody up, and changed the water out. I personally like to save my time and effort versus the do-it-yourself pollen patties. I can just order it for, I think it was like $20 or $30, get 10, good. So the pollen patties, the do-it-yourself pollen patties, they're a little bit more. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, don't buy the mix. That stuff turns into the biggest pile of glue you've ever seen in your life, and everything that you touch turns into a mess. It is a mess. So I'll add that to Adam. Buy the pre-made ones. Save yourself some heartache.
There you have it. I haven't dealt with anything other than the pre-made. They're super easy, super simple. They don't stink. They're kind of just bland, and put them on and go. So tedious. If you're going to do it yourself, it's tedious. It requires a lot of work. Next slide, slide 15. So there are many different ways to feed bees. The sugar water mixture. It's going to depend on what you're most comfortable with. So here we have 3 pictures. The left is a Boardman feeder, and that's what I started out feeding my small colony of bees. I used a ball glass jar and put the sugar water mixture in there and put it on the tray. Tray fits into the between the bottom board and your deep hive body, and just kind of leans there. The bees come and go, feed as they please, no big deal. Well, that gets a little bit tedious in itself because either you're driving someplace to feed your bees or you're walking to the back 40 or to your backyard to feed your bees every day. So the middle picture here is the 1 and 2 gallon bucket feeders. Now with these bucket feeders, you're going to want to make sure that it's food grade, because you're basically putting in food for the bees. And you can buy these already ready to rock and roll, like you see in the picture. You can go to Lowe's. You can buy the 2 gallon bucket from Lowe's and buy the screened insert that goes in there. You just have to take a hole saw, punch it through, snap it in there, and you're ready to go. The way this works is that, if you can remember, that top inner cover had a hole in it. Well, what you will do is you'll take that top outer cover off, and you'll flip this bucket over so that the screen is pointing down through that hole, and you cover that hole up, and the bees will come up from the bottom and feed off of it. Centrifugal force and the water pressure keeps it from just like dumping into the hive itself. If it does dump into the hive itself, you'll drown your bees. It sounds scary, but once you kind of look at it and figure, test it out, a few steps away, you're like, oh yeah, it does work. The far right picture is a top hive feeder. There's a college in Canada called the University of Guelph, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that's how they feed their bees in their apiary, and it works for them. They pour the sugar water mixture in. I've got like dozens of 5 gallon buckets pre-made. They dump the water mixture in there, put some straw on top, and the bees just attack it. The straw gives the bees something to stand on without drowning, because bees aren't really good, honeybees aren't really good swimmers. They'll drown. So you've got to, if you decide to do the top hive feeder, you've got to put something for the bees to stand on, rocks, straw, what have you, for the bees to feed on. Okay, so slide 16. Questions. I will ask, if you have questions, to type them up in the, if you can, type them in the box,
Chat.
and I'll try to go from there.
All right, you should be able to talk if you're not muted. You should be able to say something or type us if you have any questions for Adam or David today.
And guys, this is David. I want to say something too. Adam and I, we're honestly pretty new at this. So if there's anybody on here that says, well, I've been doing bees for 20 years and I don't do any of that, every person's going to find something completely different and unique that they like to do with their bees and how they do it with their bees. So part of the goal for this, for me, is to grow. So if you say, hey, I try this, then next time we could say, show us how to do it. Tell us how to do it, because maybe the way we're doing it is not cost effective or helpful to the bees, because we are trying to learn as well. So don't think because we're the ones semi-hosting this that we are experts, because we're not. But it's something we care about.
Correct.
And Adam and I have talked many times that, say it comes to honey time and you don't have an excluder, and say, well, that's another $300. So I don't want to spend that. We want this group to form into something that says, hey, can I borrow your stuff, or can we do it together to help, save some money and grow in our own little community of beekeepers as well as veterans and everything else, just to make more resources. So like Adam said, bees, if you start one hive, you could easily spend $1,000. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't normally have $1,000 extra just to spend on a hobby that I don't know if I'm going to love. But, just reach out and try to find it. Like if I'm working on my hives and you say, David or Adam, can I come out sometime and do this? Like obviously you probably need a veil because you'll be pretty miserable if you don't. But, just come try it out with us sometime. Like I'm pretty open to that. But when you come, work will be done. So if you come, be willing to work.
You have a question on there if you want to read the question for everyone on the phone and maybe one of you answer it.
Yeah, well, Kim Hoyle asked, when's a good target date to start for 2021? I'm mistypoed there. April's a good time. I think they'll start doing orders winter for nukes and packages. Bee clubs, beekeepers, those folks will start accepting orders like January, February timeframe. So that way, when all their splits are made during that very first really good, what do they call it? False winter or false spring, sorry. They'll make their splits, and then when their splits are made, they know that they need to have 20 or 160 nukes or packages. So I really wouldn't buy or accept the bees before April, because really, I mean, shoot, I think it was in 2013 was a really bad winter, and we still had snow on the ground in April. So, I wouldn't take anything but before April. That's just me.
And something to think about too is bees, like Adam said, bees are like a livestock. So there are up years and down years. I know for Dayton's last year, if you didn't put your order in, I think it was by February, I want to say, they had already met their quota of what they were going to be able to receive. So, you have to be on top of it to be involved with this, because, like I said, they're like a cattle. I also have cattle. So if the stock market's up, everyone has them. If they're low, you might have them available, but you need to be ahead of that, because you might have to call a couple different places too to find availability, because they'll already be gone.
Yeah, that's.
We have a couple more people typing questions. Does someone say they have a question?
Yeah, this is Lee. Sorry, I couldn't get on the website, but do you guys have a list of what it costs for these things to start up?
Could you hear him, Adam?
No, I barely. What was the question?
I think Lee Silvers was asking, he said, do you guys have a list of, like, I think this is what I heard, do you have a list of pricing or availability, or is it under that resource on your slide from the places that you have? Is that what you said, Lee?
He was asking for like startup costs,
Okay.
itemized list of startup costs approximately.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so the startup costs are going to be dependent on what you're looking to do. So you're looking at a package of bees, a package, not a nuke, a package of bees being around $150. A nuke is going to be around $165. If you were to go to Dayton, the website I provided, Dayton, you can thoroughly search different types of beehive packages that they have available. I mean, you can get everything from, you can get your bee suit, you can get a jacket, you can get your hive tool, you can get multiples if you want. You can get two frames.
I think I got my kit from them. I think it was $400 for pretty much the bee starter suit.
Yeah, I think that's what mine was too. Yep,
mine
you're good.
Came with a box frame, one hive. Yep.
What did you say, David? I missed some of that. What did you say? Yours came with what?
Sorry, Adam. Yeah, mine came with one of everything you need. However, when I say everything you need, that's a low quantity, because it came with 2 deeps, a super, the whole box pretty much, a smoker, jacket, which I got to upgrade, so I got the nicer jacket, gloves, and some smoker fodder.
And all that came together. What was the cost of that? Do you remember?
I think that was $400 and then $150 for my first package.
Okay. Can you, for the people on the phone too, we have quite a few people on the phone. Could you read the questions? And the other thing, I know people have to get off and we'll be leaving. So just, I wanted to mention, if you're interested and I don't have your email, Please send me your email because we will be sending out resources or updates every month on the upcoming meeting, and I want to make sure you're included, and also things that you want them to share about or things you want to learn more about, and give us some ideas to keep this going and be part of this great group.
Yeah, so real quick, Lisa Jones asked a pretty good question, and David answered it just the way it should read. The different types of bees, you can think about them as the different types of dogs. There are Italians, there are Russians, there are Michigan mutts, there is a hybrid bee called the Purdue ankle biter. There's Michigan State's trying to come up with one similar to the Purdue ankle biter. And the reason why they're called the Purdue ankle biter is that they are specific to the varroa mite. They will eradicate or lessen the amount of varroa mite that you have in your hives. Now, that's not to say that, branners, those are another different type of bee. You've also got to think like this too. If you get a queen and she is unmated and she goes out to do her mating flight, there is no guarantee that she's going to find another, let's say, Italian drone to mate with. So you're not guaranteed that her offspring, even though you're getting, an Italian colony, there's no guarantee that her offspring are going to be Italian, if that's really what you're looking for, or Russian, or whatever. So you're eventually going to get Michigan mutts, is what you're going to look for. Wild bees, or feral bees, if you want to go with that, that is going to be probably your most sustainable. However, they're going to be fairly susceptible to disease. And we'll do a class over disease because that's huge. So, Lisa, that was a really good question. Thank you.
Well, I think
David
there was
again.
a little.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. Somebody asked
I
about
think
the
there was.
bee, like Adam said. Oops, sorry, Lisa.
I think there's a whole lot more to that answer than just high pollen counts. I mean, don't you want to look for the healthier bees? So you want, at least this is my understanding, because I'm pretty interested in this. I truly do not want bees. I don't want to tend them, but like pesticides and having organic and actually native plants for them, it keeps them healthier, correct? I mean, that's my understanding of it. So just randomly high pollen count flowers, I don't think is. I mean, that's probably a good start, but
if you have white clover that pops up in your yard, which most people do here in Michigan, and you mow that clover, that's the food source. So what's funny is I have a beekeeper friend of mine who's done bees for like 40 years, and he has 3 acres, and whenever you see a little clover spot pop up in his yard, he doesn't mow that stuff. So yes, obviously pesticide is like the worst thing ever for bees, because if they get enough of that, they'll bring that back to the brew and it'll make a foul brew. So that brew is bad for the bees. But like dandelions, the moment dandelions pop up, there's enough pollen in dandelions even for bees to sustain and start growing their hive each year. So there's a lot more pollens that you think even in your area, like tree pollen. They don't just use flower pollen. So the reason I suggested like flowers that have a lot of pollen is because they're beautiful, they're colorful. Obviously, bees are attracted to those colors, so it helps draw them in. So if bees will fly 3 miles from their hive to your house if they find a viable food source, aka pollen, and return back to their hive. So if you have a good quantity of that, they mark that so that when they go back to the hive, they tell everyone else, hey, here's a good stash of food, and there will be more bees visiting your house or your yards than if you didn't have those vibrant colors. And that's my personal opinion. I've done a little research on that, and I feel pretty strongly about that. That's why I plant crimson red clover, because it's a big, bright, pretty clover. But that's my opinion, and obviously everyone's going to have their own opinion, but Adam, do you have something different?
Well, the only thing I would add to that is that specifically, Lisa, what I think the type of flower that you're looking for isn't your, oh gosh, it's not your tulips and the lilies. You're looking for more of the dandelion. So if you were to take a microscope to a dandelion, we'll just go with that, with the dandelion. Dandelion is one flower. However, each, I don't know the specific name. I'm just going to be very blunt here. Each petal on the dandelion has the pollen and the nectar that the bees are looking for. So you're looking for the clovers. You're going to look for milkweed. What was the other one? Well, that's not. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
Yep, I have all that, and I have seeded white clover in the yard, which puts my significant other gives him chest pain. All of that does, but so far it hasn't killed him.
Right now, like goldenrod's at its end. The USDA office in Marshall, they actually have, and you can go to Pheasants Forever, and they have a pollinator mixture. So if you're really looking for like, hey, I just want a flower bed of like native plants, then you can just go to Pheasants Forever. Or I actually went to the Farm Bureau this past spring and said, hey, do you have a pollinator mixture? They said, yeah, we do. I said, let me get 8 pounds of it. They're like, okay. And they just filled my little bag or my huge bag up with 8 pounds of the pollinator habitat and ran the rototiller out, took it and just broadcast it by hand and then covered it up. I mean, if there was one specific flower, I would definitely go with the clover.
You guys, did you see the question from Zeke Wheeland? It says, he was asking about the different breeds of bees and also do they behave or act differently? And how do you, as the website, identify the bee temperaments or the disposition of the bees?
So Zeke, this is David Potter. So each breed has its own positives and negatives, in my opinion. So if you jumped on and you got the Russian bees, from what I've seen, they are the hands down the best producers out there right now. But their temperament is not one that is enjoyable for me because I have my children help me with my bees. But with that, you get more output. So if you go in to open their hives to do inspections, there's more likelihood that those bees are going to get riled up. I have had beehives in the last 2 years that I have been able to go in and lightly open their hives and visually inspect without obviously cracking the frames apart, with no mask on, no gloves on, and they're pretty calm about it. However, with the different variations of bees, that's not going to be the case. So for me personally, everything I have, I want to have calm because I have, like I said, I have small children, and that doesn't mean that the calmer bees won't sting you. I had an instance 2 years ago where bumblebees were trying to get in my hives, and I didn't like that. So I walked up with my foot and I squished those yellow jackets or bumblebees. And then my honeybees thought, oh, you want to mess with us too. So I got stung multiple times, not thinking that they didn't realize I was there trying to help. So I always go to corianders, I think is how you say it, or the Michigan mutts, like Adam has said, because they're a little bit more docile. Yeah, they don't produce as much honey as the other breeds, but I enjoy them more because I don't have to get all worked up to work with them.
Can you guys, I know we talked a little bit about maybe that you at some point when we're all back in the building doing like a build of, can you talk about that if anybody's interested in that? It sounds like we have a lot of new people that want to get started.
Yep. So with that, and this is my personal experience, I've actually, if you're trying to like build your own hives, to me personally, it's almost more cost effective to buy a pre-made box and just paint it yourself. I have a buddy that he has like 180 hives, and I asked him one time, I said, how do you pick your colors for your boxes? He said, whatever extra paint I had sitting around. So he's got orange ones, blue ones. It doesn't really matter because you don't want to paint them dark, obviously, because when you make them dark, they create more heat. So in the summer times, your bees would be too hot. They get too hot. So you do lighter colors, so it's not as harsh on them, and they can control the heat inside the boxes. But my opinion is I would buy a pre-made box just because the ones you have to assemble are darn near the same price anyways. So in my opinion, you're not saving much money.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I agree with David on that. We were actually talking about building some just as let's save some money and build our own boxes. So David's like, dude, I think just for my time, it's worth the $60 for the deep. I said, yeah, that's right. And Tim, you are correct. I did do a green and white hive.
Wow, all these Michigan State fans. That's awesome. My alma mater.
Yeah, get
Well,
out your people.
does anybody have any other questions or any suggestions at all for these guys for, our next time, which would be November, I don't have my calendar here, November 4th would be our next meeting. Anybody have any thoughts or ideas, please shout them out or
I have
send it. Go ahead.
Lisa, if you were interested, if you had I know you said you don't want to tend bees or you don't want to tend their hives. This is just a suggestion. I haven't tried this myself, but I do know quite a few people that are in bee clubs. You could say like, hey, I was wondering if you go to a bee club meeting, they normally have them monthly. You could say, hey, I was wondering if somebody had a couple of hives they were interested in putting at my house. Granted, you'd have to get the feel of them and see how they are, but most times the people in the bee clubs are pretty honest that they would be able to put a hive at your house, and that would help a lot too.
Yeah.
I've got a question too. This is Lee. Where did you cover where on the property to put the hives? Because I've got 50 acres with a 3 to 4 acre pond, and the acreage has grass, woods, and gravel pit. So where's the best place to put it?
So, and this is a personal
facing.
opinion of mine, is I moved mine away from my house so that the bees aren't always at my house. They're going to be up here anyways, but I don't want the quantities of the beehive up here. And they have to be close to water, because if you don't, say you have a swimming pool, all your bees will die in your pool because you treat your pool with chemicals to keep it nice. So somewhere by the water, but you want it to be a spot where it gets plenty of sunlight, because and protected. So it's tricky, you don't want to be just out open, but you want to be able to keep them covered and protected as well. Covered as in like give them the shade, but in the winter you don't want them, if you're not going to move them, to get all the wind if the wind's blowing.
This is just rumor, but I heard that like woodland bees can be pretty pissy.
Can you repeat that?
I heard that woodland bees, like bees that are kept in a woods, can be pretty nasty. So if you, like mine are on the edge of my pond. They're about 40 yards away from the pond and south facing in a field.
Okay.
So now I'm also going to say I know beekeepers that plop their hives, their 3 or 4 hives right in the middle of a field, and let the bees go to town. And when it comes to fall and winter time, they buy the round bales and they just kind of encircle the apiary, the small little apiary, in the round bales, or they buy 2 or however it is, just for a windbreak.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks.
Okay, well, really good session today, guys. Great kickoff, and thank you so much for your time and for everyone joining us today. And I do have it pre-recorded as soon as I figure out how to download it, since this is a new system for all of us. But if anybody, I know Lee, you had a trouble getting on, or anybody else who wants to hear it. But thank you so much for joining us and for supporting bees. It's such an important cause that really is how we have food. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This
Spread
is
the word to
great.
others, please.